I'm Jan.
And I'm Tracey.
And we were so thrilled to be able to go on the Oceania Regatta for 24 days from Singapore all the way to Sydney.
As always, we understand that cruising is a personal experience and two people can have different perspectives of the same cruise.
So these are just going to be our observations of our cruise on the Oceania Regatta.
So to discuss our review, we will examine the ship and the cruise using a series of categories, and then we're going to give you the 3 things that we wish that Oceania would have done a little bit better, and the 3 things that we really liked.
Now, the categories we're going to be looking at are the ship, the cabin, the surface, the food, the entertainment, and of course, Oceania's excursions.
So let's start with the ship itself. The Regatta is one of what are known as R-class ships.
Now, the R-class ships are these small ships that were built by Renaissance Cruise Lines.
The second ship in the line, the R2, was built in 1998. And when Renaissance Cruise went bankrupt in 2001, Oceania Cruise Line bought the R2, and they renamed it the Oceania Regatta, along with 3 other R-class ships, the Insignia, the Nautica, and the Sirena. This was a ship built in 1998. That's over 25 years ago, and this was before the recent trend of bigger and bigger ships.
Yeah, the Regatta certainly isn't a big ship. Its a double capacity is only 636 passengers, and it weighs in at about 33,000 tons. Now, to give you an idea of what that really means, that is actually half the size of the Oceania's newer ships, such as the Marina and the Vista.
And because these ships are so small, they can get into smaller ports than most other cruise ships. And it does give you a more intimate experience and interaction, not only with the other guests, but with your cruise staff.
And another thing about having just 500 to 600 people on board is when you get to a port, you get on and off a ship faster than almost every other cruise line. You do not have that entire gaggle there at the gangway.
And as part of one of the massive renovations that happened with the R-class ships, they put in a whole new look with Ralph Lauren interiors throughout the ship that gives it a really crisp nautical look.
Now, of course, your spaces, we love the spaces. For example, Horizons Lounge. Now, Horizons Lounge is that lounge at the front of the ship. It has the floor-to-ceiling windows wrapping around 270 degrees, which is absolutely beautiful. And another thing we love about Horizons Lounge was if you get up early before the coffee opens up and baristas at 6 or 6:30, you have coffee 24/7 available in the Horizons. And if you want something else a little bit harder to drink, we love martinis. There's always a piano player there. It has a great vibe. And basically, before every dinner, you would see Tracey and I in martinis, having a martini.
And so even though this is a small ship, it does have a pool, a nice sized pool and hot tubs, and plenty of seating around the pool area and the pool deck. And we spent a lot of time there.
Now, usually when we're talking about the ship, that's about where we have it. Most cruise ships are very nice, and we would go on and on, just as we did about those things we love. But there was a problem here. What we found was a lapse in maintenance. For example, we know that on a cruise ship, you're always in a fight against rust. However, the Regatta, they were losing that battle. When we got on the ship, you'll just look around on the decks, you would see a lot more rust than I'm used to. And then if you go on the top decks, we found that the wood railings along those top decks were worn down, and there actually were rust.
And talk about one of the big things that was a fail on this cruise was the air conditioning was out the first 2 or 3 days on board. Would not have been such a big problem, except for we boarded in Singapore, which is right above the equator, and it was hot. I mean, it was steamy hot. And not having air conditioning made it feel very stuffy and uncomfortable. Even in places like the Martini Bar, the public area, we were sweating, with the doors closed and the air conditioning kind of blowing this very weak, cool air. It was just not a good scene.
Now, another big thing was the sports deck. I know what you're going to say. Let me explain here. When we got up to the sports deck, we saw that the shuffleboard and the cornhole, they've just ripped out. And the pieces to that weren't actually put anywhere on the decks. They were kind of stuffed into the superstructure they had up there on the 11th deck, kind of like how our kids used to stuff their dirty laundry into our closet, just, trying to make it go away, and they don't want to do anything. The AstroTurf that they ripped up was just rolled up and laid aside. Now, listen, do I care about cornhole? No. Do I care about shuffleboard? No. The issue is, why did they do so? The only reason they did so is because they had to make room for the 2 20-foot refrigeration trailers that they had bolted to the deck. And what that told us was, although we didn't have firsthand experience with it, obviously they had something wrong with the refrigeration down below decks. And again, if you don't take care of the small things, you're not taking care of the big things. And unfortunately, that's what we saw. And so what you're going to see is what we've titled this is Not Quite Right. And this seemed that there was something that just wasn't right with this cruise and with the crew. And it's not just maintenance. We had issues with the entertainment were not quite right. The food is not quite right. Now, let me give you a caveat. We have friends that went on the regatta before our cruise and friends that went on to the regatta after our cruise, and they didn't have any of these issues. So we're kind of chalking up that there was just something going on with this one cruise, and it's not a systemic issue with the regatta.
Let's talk about things that were good on this ship, and that would be our room. So to save some money on this particular sailing, this was the first time in a really long time that we did not get a balcony, and we opted instead for an ocean view room. It was 160 square feet. I thought it was beautifully decorated, beautiful Ralph Lauren sheets and fabrics, very comfortable bed, never had to ask for a mattress topper, and it had a really nicely lit vanity.
Yeah, the other thing is that big window. Even though we didn't have a balcony, we could see out no problem. But the other great thing about that big window is there a huge window sill or shelf, and it was a great place for us to put things like, with just different things like tripods and other things that we didn't have room for. A great place for extra storage. Now, the only downside is that it has a very small bathroom. If you're sitting on the potty, you can pretty much touch anything in that bathroom. Now, here's the thing. It's not just having an ocean view room. We have very good friends that had a concierge suite that were on our same cruise, and their bathroom was just as small.
Although the room was small, I thought it was very well organized, especially the bathroom. And that was all part of this refurbishment that they did, I think, in 2019 or 2020. One of the biggest things that I thought was a great improvement was they put in clear shower doors instead of the vinyl curtains, which are just not fun on any cruise line. They had Bulgari toiletries, which was a nice touch. And when the air conditioning finally did get fixed 3 or 4 days into the cruise, it was a much more comfortable sailing.
Now, another thing that was good was the service. And I'll tell you, I love the bartenders and the wait staff. They were very personable and engaged. They would talk with you as you get to know them a bit. Our ring steward was fantastic. And really, in all the venues, we had very cheerful, energetic waiters in the restaurants.
Although we did think in the main dining room specifically that the food service was very slow.
Yeah. Now, the service is usually very good on cruises, but I'm going to give a shout out to Oceania for something that I don't see a lot of times on cruises, and that was the management. Now, because of the maintenance issues I saw on our mid-cruise comments, I sent that in and told them what I saw. And usually, quite frankly, let's be honest, usually when you have these reviews, you think they're basically fire and forget, and no one's going to read them. Except the very next day, I had a phone call from the general manager stating that they had seen this and they were already putting people to work. And the next day, we saw people taking down the wood railings and going in and having them sanded and working throughout the ship. And even by the end of the cruise, they had actually reinstalled the shuffleboard and the cornhole up there. So this is really, really good when you see that you have a people that can say, yeah, we need to fix this, and you actually get something. I really, truly give a shout out to Oceania. That's a very big positive.
So let's now talk about the food. While this was a small ship, only 600 passengers, there were 6 places that you could get food. And that included the main dining room, the Terrace Cafe, which is the buffet, the Waves Grill, and of course, room service. We love the Waves Grill. That was a great place to get a good burger on a sea day or after getting back from an excursion that went past the time that the main dining room would have been closed. We also felt that the room service was good, very good, and it was among the fastest that we'd had at sea. We thought that the buffet was good pretty much for every meals except for breakfast because they did kind of lack variety in the mornings.
They didn't have blueberries.
And they didn't have, you had to ask for like fresh cooked eggs. That was just weird. But we ate here quite often.
Yeah, so for me, I tell you what, Oceania has one of the best buffets at sea, but I don't eat blueberries like Tracey does. I did love the buffet. We love the buffet. And I love the Waves Grill. I didn't think I'd ever have to say this about Oceania. When it comes to the main dining room and the 2 specialty restaurants, we were actually very disappointed. We had such a great culinary experience on the marina last year, or at least in October 22. We thought that, of course, we were going to have a great, it just wasn't. The MDR, It was okay. It was decent, but it didn't live up to what we had before. And then we get to the specialty restaurants. We went to the Polo Grill twice, and quite frankly, they couldn't cook steaks. We had a very good friend that was with us, and not only in the Polo Grill, but other restaurants. She had to send her steak back 5 times because it was the wrong temperature. And we're talking about a variance of getting a medium rare steak confused with a well-done steak. It just wasn't right. And I had a steak at Polo that was cooked properly, but the quality of the meat was just to the point that I couldn't actually get through it. And I love steak. And then we have Toscana. Again, usually this is a restaurant we absolutely love, but we also had to send food back because it was wrong temperatures, or we had calamari. I had fried calamari. I love that. But I bit into it, and it just didn't seem right. We pulled over the head waiter, and they said, yes, the chef wasn't happy with what they got from the port, but he put it on the menu anyway. And I think that was just absolutely the wrong answer. Now, again, there is goodness here. The head chef actually changed in about halfway through the cruise. And once he came on board, you would see him everywhere. Not only would you see him in the specialty restaurants making the rounds, asking and talking to guests, you would see him in the main dining room. Heck, they were doing a cookie decorating up in Horizons, and he was there as well. So again, I think this was a one-off. I think that he was actually turning the ship around, so to speak, but there was something just not quite right with what was going on this cruise.
So now we're going to move on to entertainment. We thought that the singers were very, very good, even though the production staff was quite small. These were very small production shows.
Now, I also love the fact you talk about the production shows is the production staff, the entertainers, would also be the ones that would be going down and helping run evening trivia. They would be there helping with playing cornhole for O points. And what I love about that is you really, especially in a long cruise like this, you really got to know them. And we're not necessarily show people. That's not why we cruise or travel. But we would find ourselves going, oh, there's a show. And we wanted to go there because we had played games in the Horizons earlier that day with the entertainers. So it's just a great, great concept that this cruise line has.
We really enjoyed the coffee and conversations that they had on sea days in the mornings, and we loved playing trivia. So they offered trivia twice a day. They did it in the afternoons and in the evenings after dinner.
Yeah, no, usually they have really good guest lecturers. We did have one that wasn't all that good. He would just basically read, with the exception his first lecture, he would just kind of read directly, which doesn't really excite me. But again, there was, even for those entertainment things that is fully within what is Oceania, there was things that weren't quite right. For example, the string quartet. String quartets are supposed to have 4 people. The entire cruise, they only had 3 people. And I always kind of giggled whenever they make an announcement that we have the quartet, and it would always be 3 people. At the very beginning of the cruise, the band that played in the venues, they didn't have all their members there until halfway through the cruise. And then halfway through the cruise, what we found was about half of the entertainments for the production staff, basically, they were actually leaving. Again, there's just something that wasn't quite right about this. Now, one thing I was disappointed for, not necessarily for Tracey and I, was that when we went across the equator, there wasn't a Neptune crossing. If you're not aware, many times when you go across either the Antarctic Circle, the Arctic Circle, or the equator, there's some type of festival that basically commemorates your crossing of that line. We did the Neptune's party on the World Cruise, which was fantastic. It was a special an event for us to always think of. And I was disappointed for those people that did not have that, because on the second day after we left out of Singapore, we went across the equator. I'm sure that there was going to be something, and there wasn't anything. And when I talked to the cruise director about it, he said, well, the issue was because we just had people coming on board the day before, which is very busy, we didn't have time to prepare for it. And quite frankly, I think that was just that's just poor planning. I think they could have done so better. I think there's, those people that maybe they had gone across the equator for their very first time. They really missed out on an experience that I think Oceania could have given them.
So let's talk about the excursions. On Oceania, excursions are not included in your cruise fare. You do pay extra for them. Now, the good news is, the pros of it is they did use local guides, and they were very good on the particular excursions that we used. Oceania does offer a free shuttle in almost every port. So honestly, you don't really have to do an excursion. If you're a little bit more of an intrepid traveler, you can do a lot of this stuff on your own. We chose 4 excursions with the ship. We really enjoyed the ones in Indonesia. We went to Semarang and we went to Bali. They were great. We went to Adelaide in Australia. It wasn't very good. Tasmania was fantastic. But we ended up doing 2 places on our own, went to Geraldton on our own, and we just kind of did a DIY excursion. But the one that we really liked was one that we booked ourselves through Viator because we had an overnight in Perth, and that was the Pinnacles Desert.
Hey Trace, how was it?
That was fun, but I'm done. Finished. And I'll tell you, for the money that we spent, even if we hadn't spent half of that or twice that, that was the best excursion I think we've ever done.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And I'll tell you, the Oceania excursions are very well done, but they are pricey. And what we kind of learned about Oceania is if you are looking at doing a highlights excursion, we'd recommend do it on your own. Not only you're going to see more, but quite frankly, you're going to really save a lot of money. All right, so those are the categories. Now, what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about our 3 ups and our 3 downs. And we're going to start with the downs. And the first of all, as we talked about, was the food quality, especially for a cruise line that has trademarked the trademark or the motto, best cuisine at sea. The specialty restaurants and even the main dining room did not live up to what it needs to be, but I'll take a burger from the Waves Grill any day.
The other downs that we have is the pricing of the excursions and the beverage package. We felt that the excursions were far overpriced for what we thought that you were going to get. And the beverage package, so we had to simply more, I think it was included in our cruise fare. But after we went through that cruise, we saw that most people who choose not to do the beverage package will do drinks on their own. And I think that for us is a better way to do it. And I think when we got off of that cruise, we realized we would do drinks by the drink rather than do a beverage package again, because it was quite expensive.
Yeah. And of course, our third down obviously was the maintenance. There was just something not right, and it should have never come to that level.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about the ups. And the biggest up I can think of is the layout of the ship and the ship size. Because it's such a small ship, it's easy to navigate. We give you all the benefits of why it is good to be on a small ship. We just really enjoy the smaller ships for what they provide to you.
And not only just what you have on board, but quite frankly, what those small ships mean is the itinerary. If you have a smaller ship, not only can you go to all the big ports like Sydney, like all the other cruise ships we'll be able to go to, but you can go to the smaller ships like Broome and those smaller places that you would not be able to get to if you're in with a big ship. And this is one of the things that really attract us to Oceania.
And the overall value is our third big up. Between the two of us, now we did have an ocean view room. We did not choose for a balcony this time because of the pricing. But even with that, on a luxury line, $433 per day for both of us. And that was all in it. And that included the Simply More wine and beer at lunch and dinner.
Now, there are so many more trips that we have in store. So join us on one of those by watching this video. And as always, keep on traveling.